Hello and welcome back to Parenting Unpacked. You are here with Dr. Siobhan Kennedy Costantini and our esteemed friend, Dr. Kristyn Summer.
You make that sound like I'm a guest. I am also a host. I have been here
You're
all
a host, but
all
you are
20
esteemed.
episodes.
Is it that many?
Yes, this is episode 20.
And Siobhan, in honor of episode 20, we're going to do something that we do every week, and that's to divulge personal accounts of our life. And one that we discovered recently, well, you discovered that I had experienced, was something called DMER. So DMER is Dysphoric Milk Ejection Reflex. Siobhan, you are somewhat of a breastfeeding expert, given that's what your PhD was on. Can you tell me a little bit about DMER?
It's a very under-researched topic. It tends to affect about 10% of breastfeeding mothers. And basically, so I don't experience it myself, so we'll get to help the milk release from the breast. Mothers who have DMER experience a range of negative emotions. So whether that's anger, frustration, shame, which is probably a bit too complex, but like just feel awful. They might feel really depressed, really anxious, borderline panic attacks sometimes. Mm-hmm. It usually only lasts 2 to 5 minutes. It's pretty consistent. It tends to happen every feed, but it dissipates quickly. Is this your experience?
Yes. I don't know how else to describe it. Oh. Like, looking back on it. So I had pretty extreme postnatal anxiety and depression, and kind of punctuated by panic attacks. And those panic attacks would generally revolve around when I was going to feed my child next, and I'd get a letdown, and then the panic attack would get much worse. So I had that, and then I also had like feelings of rage, so much like annoyance and rage.
Yeah, particularly when feeding.
When feeding, in the early days I'd have rage about her not sleeping, but particularly when feeding, and it actually now is more noticeable in like manifestations of rage rather than anxiety or depression or like a sense of impending doom, as is like a really common version of DMER. But essentially I've been breastfeeding for 2.5 years. My body is incredibly sensitive to hormones, and this is something I learned when I got pregnant and suddenly didn't have anxiety anymore. But I did have depression instead. So I used to have very little depression, but like lots of anxiety. No, it took a turn. So like it was kind of a trade-off. I ended up with a ton of depression in my pregnancy, but like my anxiety kind of eased off, and it was beautiful for a little while. I'd take depression the way I had it over anxiety any day, because my anxiety causes physical symptoms and limits my ability to function in the world, whereas depression just kind of makes things a little less shiny. And makes you feel like nothing's ever going to be good. It's complicated. Both bad. Yeah, this is a weird hot take episode. But anyways, so my body is super sensitive to hormones. When I gave birth, my hormones went mental. And you will listen to this on, I think it's episode 3. I reckon it's episode 3 where I talk about my postnatal anxiety and depression. So if you go back to episode 3, you will hear my entire description of my emotional experience in antenatal, postpartum, whatever, all of it. And I'm super sensitive to hormones, and I know this. So when you get a flood of oxytocin in your brain, a lot of people call it the love hormone, but in my body, it's the freak the fuck out hormone. And it comes in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. It can make me nauseous. It can make me irritated. It can make me rage. It can make me, anxious, sad. It does. It's an emotional roller coaster. I have lots of feelings. And so, I think it took me a long time to recognize I had it, because, I was just generally in a state of, disarray for most of my early parenthood experience. So when I started equaling out, I started to notice that these peaks kind of coincided with breastfeeding my child.
And when you're breastfeeding a younger, smaller baby, they feed a lot more often. So it would probably be a lot harder to identify that it's associated with that specifically.
Yeah, and I would get a lot more letdowns. I don't let down as often anymore, and I could feel my letdowns. So I should have noticed it then, but I didn't, except for when like I was in the middle of a panic attack and then I get a letdown and my panic attack would get worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's such like, it's such an interesting chaotic interplay, and like it's not just like breastfeeding and the hormones fluctuations that cause this in my body. Because of the release of oxytocin, like I do get like a pinpointed time when like I feel and experience, and at the moment it is irritation up to like overwhelming rage, which I'm good at controlling. But it's still tricky to navigate in terms of breastfeeding my child, because she will be feeding to sleep, and she will be stroking my body because she needs a lot of sensory input to go to sleep. And she'll start tickling my underarm, and it starts to get really frustrating, and then she'll like slip off my boob for a second, and that hurts, and so I'll pull back and I'll be like, I need to take a breath, and she'll lose her mind because she's just like a sensitive kid that gets easily triggered, so she starts screaming at me to like breastfeed her again, and I'm like, I can't do that right now, I need to breathe. And she has now learned that like if something like that happens and I'm like, I need to stop for a minute, she's like, she grabs me and she puts her hand on my chest and on my belly and goes, Mummy, breathe. Just like, that's
so
cute.
sweet,
so cute, because she now knows like how to navigate it, and she's better at controlling her own emotions around it as well, and actually will wait for me. She'll just give me a big cuddle and wait for me to be calm again, so we don't get the tantrums as often. But yeah, the breastfeeding, I don't know why it lasted this long, how I've managed to last this long.
Yeah.
I'm not being a martyr.
Well, I think, no, I mean, well, certainly by the sounds of things, in comparison to your earlier, earlier parenting journey, this anxiety is nothing.
No, it's not.
Compared to where you were.
Yeah, it's way easier.
So, like, it's still bad,
yes,
and there's still challenges associated with it, but compared to where you've been, you're like, oh, well, this is unpleasant, but...
This is unpleasant, but it's short-lived, and the moment it's over, I can, like, walk out once she's asleep and just be like, that was frustrating, but now I'm fine. Except...
And particularly now that you have a bit more of, like, context around it. And, like, this is the thing, right? DMER is... It's only... I think it was, like, the early 90s that anyone really documented it. And presumably, like, it seems so very little research has been done. The research that has been done tends to just be descriptive research, so where this is where the researchers are just saying what they've seen or what they've heard women describe. So there's no experimentation, there's no trying to figure out the mechanism or the cause, there's no biological investigation in any true depth. So there's still so many unanswered questions, but yeah, it's not well understood. So it's not at all surprising that you didn't know this was a thing. And it's so easy, right? Like when you're experiencing something that you have never heard of before, to assume that it's, oh, this is just me. And then when you learn that there's a name for it and that other people experience it, it really helps to contextualize. And in your experience, perhaps like to be like, oh, this is a normal thing. This is just how my body works. It'll be over in a few minutes. And when you know that there's an end, that can be hugely beneficial.
And I think like the really crazy thing is that I did know what DMER was, but I didn't know the breadth of DMER. So I didn't know that DMER wasn't just a sense of impending doom. Like when you read about DMER, when you Google it, it's just classified or explained as a sense of impending doom, and that is it. And that's not my experience of it at all. Like my experience of it is my like expression of anxiety or rage and irritation, which are very, very different things. So yeah, DMER isn't well understood, but neither is a lot of like hormonal, like female hormonal fluctuations and how they coincide with mental health. Like another one that I discovered when I got my cycle back was that I am way more anxious right around the time that I get my cycle. Like at the time that I don't know what it's called. I don't know what phase it's called. Just when I'm about to like get my cycle, that's when I start like getting really, really anxious because there is some kind of hormone going through my body that is just not okay. And I didn't know for many, many years that the reason that my mother put me on birth control at 15 was because of my hormonal fluctuations and how it was affecting my behavior. And so, you know, I just like suddenly went off birth control and then immediately got pregnant. And now I finally got my cycle back, and I'm learning again now that my body's so sensitive to hormonal fluctuations. I need to go back on birth control. I was like, I won't ever go back on birth control. It's fine. I don't need it. I'm back on birth control because I need it to help my body stay consistent. So yeah, that's fun facts.
Fun facts, the things you learn.
Fun facts. I also asked the doctor, I was like, will this affect my milk? Like, will it dry it up? And she's like, no, of course not. Don't worry about that. Once you make it through the first 3 months, your milk's established. And I was like, that's unfortunate, because I'd really love it to be dried up so that she stops breastfeeding, so I don't have to make that decision.
There are drugs you can take.
I don't know if I want to, because I think she'll just dry us up.
Completely.
Like, what happens if I don't have any milk and she just dries it? And then she's just furious.
This is totally I remember when I was so my eldest sister, who now has twins, so she's got a different feeding fun journey. 7-month-old twins, so that's
mental.
Yeah, totally. But she stopped feeding her eldest around 2.5, and she described a lot of I don't think she had DMER. We haven't spoken about that specifically. She didn't describe any of those symptoms to me, but she had a similar fed up vibe. And I remember looking, and she also didn't want to take drugs to dry up her supply, which I totally understand and respect. But I started to look into all of these like cultural and like anthropological things that mothers do to try and discourage their children from feeding. And there's things, it's hilarious, like there's Aboriginal communities where they like get these really strong smelling herbs, turn it into a paste and then rub it on their nipples, and because it's an unpleasant smell. And then you can do Vegemite on your nipple, which I think that would sting.
That wouldn't hurt. That wouldn't work
Mind
for
you,
her, because I gave her Vegemite toast this morning.
She loves Vegemite.
It all off. I was like, that's not gonna work.
She's like, that will only make things worse.
But also, like, how do you, like, your child's going to know that you put something on your nipple, right? Like, they're not dumb. Like, my kid is so smart. She'd be like, can you go have a shower? Like,
go have.
How do I do this? Siobhan, I think I'm ready to wean. Like, give me some more, like, tips. Like, what might work?
As I said, I haven't looked into this for more than a year, so I'll have a bit of a look and report back, see if there's anything. Because you know how you can get like special ointment to stop you biting your fingernails?
Yeah,
Surely there's something.
Yeah, but she'd just tell me to go and shower.
There must be something.
She'd go and tell me to clean herself.
Look,
she'd say, "Mummy, dirty." Like,
she's a clever lady.
She's 2.5. All 2.5-year-olds would do that, surely. Like, I feel
so.
like the only way you're gonna like pull the wool over like a kid's eyes is if they're under 1. Like, if they're like 9 months old, maybe it's easy to wean then. But like weaning a 2.5-year-old is like a discussion, like with them.
Yeah,
it's not an easy one to have. So yeah,
You're like, family meeting time. Okay, everyone put out their grievances. Mine is feeding you.
She would just be like, mine is that mum is trying to threaten taking my milk away. How rude. Like, that is mine. Dad,
we need a mediator.
Dad. My favorite part about breastfeeding a child is that, like, when they're big enough to be like, why are you the only one that's been feeding me when dad has nipples too? And then goes and tries dad's nipples. Like, that is my favorite part of breastfeeding a child, when they're like, I wonder if his work.
Yeah. So Timo's, I don't breastfeed Timo at the moment. He was breastfed as a baby. We stopped at 12 months, pretty much, I think like a week after 12 months. And I chose the chicken's way out, or the coward's way out. I dropped him off with my in-laws and left for a week.
That's not the chicken's way out, though, because you did it for a reason. Like, you were in the depths of postnatal like anxiety and depression.
I was in a bad spot, and it was a necessary thing. And I was very lucky that not only my in-laws were willing to take him, they were able to take him, etc., etc. I trusted them to take him, all these things. But actually it was a dream. He asked, apparently, while we were away. It helps that he also has a wonderful relationship with them and has done for a long time. So he thought he'd hit the jackpot, getting to spend a whole week with Granny and Granddad and eating as much ice cream and chocolate as he wants. Like, come on, how good does that sound?
Oh my gosh.
Well, that all sounds amazing, but how about fast forwarding a little bit, Siobhan? Where is he at now? Like, what's your most recent encounter with how he feels about milk from your body?
He asked for a drink of milk. It was the cutest. He looked at me and said, Timo drink milk, mummy's boobies? Yeah. And I said, no, only babies drink milk. You're a big boy. He went, yeah, Timo, big boy. Not drink milk?
I love it. I love the big boy, like big girl.
Oh, yeah, so good. And so, yeah, and he went, and so he's got 4 baby cousins who are all about 7, 8 months old. And so he just goes through their name one at a time, like, Saoirse, drink milk? Saoirse, baby. Saoirse, drink milk. And just goes down the list. And then every now and then goes, Timo, drink milk. No, big boy, Timo, not drink milk. So he's very intrigued, but that hasn't stopped him sucking at my husband's nipples to see what comes out, which is amusing. So amusing.
Perhaps trying to induce lactation. That's hilarious.
I mean, look, there's some evidence to show that with enough stimulation, men can produce milk.
Really? Like, yeah, I know that inducing lactation in women is possible and successful in a lot of cases, but men?
With men, it's rare. It's quite rare. It requires a lot of manual stimulation. You can obviously increase your chances with drugs.
Obviously.
But yeah, it's rare, but it's possible. I don't know if haven't looked into it, but whether they've like analyzed the nutritional components of male milk.
That is a great question. That is, yeah.
I imagine the sample sizes are too small to do it.
Do they have the same mechanics? Like, they've obviously got milk storage. They've obviously got, like, the same, like, those little bumps that, like, are actually, like, little oil secretion glands.
And Montgomery glands.
Yeah, they've obviously got all of that. It's just dormant because they are a male. Because the only thing that really separates, like, women and males' chests is fatty tissue, and you don't really need fatty tissue to breastfeed because you can have women with massive boobs and like women with no breast tissue and both breastfeed the same. Yeah. So that's a really interesting question.
But I completely agree. I am super curious about even like just the chemical components. I'll do a deep dive and see what we can find out.
It's like the like nutritional value of breastfeeding a child over the age of 1. Like we know that there is a huge amount of their daily intake, and like I'm kind of worried that I'm going to have to start feeding my kid more veggies and like care about what she eats during the day because I don't breastfeed her anymore. Like I know that she gets a lot of milk because I know how full I am at the end of a kindy day. Yeah. I know that she drinks a lot of milk. So now I'm worried like if I stop breastfeeding, I actually have to care about her nutritional intake in some kind of conscious way rather than just being like real chill about what she eats and when. I'm not sure if I will ever care because I'll just make sure that she doesn't get scurvy. But I'm trying to be a good parent here, man. That's another thing to take into account. When you've been breastfeeding this long, you don't worry as much about their nutritional intake because they're getting a huge amount of it. Like there's a bunch of science on it. I don't have the science handy on me, but there's like a bunch of science on like the nutritional intake. They get so many of their daily nutrients from breast milk and it's just wild. Yeah, look, I probably won't worry because if we worry about what we feed our kids and we worry about what they're having, more importantly, what they're taking in, then we're overriding their internal hunger cues. And that's not great. And I mean, if you end up with a picky eater, that's not great either. And picky eating isn't a phase. If it goes on for a long time, it's fine for it to go on for a little while, but if it's a long time, it's better to nip that in the bud. And maybe we'll get Talia on here once her life settles down to talk about pediatric picky eating. But yeah. I think that's going to be the end of today's episode. We've chatted your ears off enough about random things like DMER and fearing the weaning process because then we have to nutritionally sustain our children. So we will catch you in the next one. We've got no idea what it is. I guess we'll find out. Bye.